I came down here, and that's where I met these wonderful people. Bill Pelkey, Abigail, Suzanne Bosler, who taught me art, who taught me about forgiveness, and how that is how people heal from these horrible crimes that are committed. It's not vengeance. It's not taking of another life. If my son dies, he won't be the one in pain anymore. It will be me and his little sister and his little brothers. We're the ones who will still be hurting. We're the ones who will be punished. Justin will be out of the box. And here's where I met Suja and Juan and other men who have been exonerated and proven innocent. And they give me hope. They give me promise that maybe one day I'll be bringing my son home too. And he can stand before people like Suja does and help children make better decisions about selling marijuana. He should be before kids in schools telling them how I thought it was so innocent. I thought I was just partying with my friends and having a good time. It was just marijuana. And helping them realize that in a blink of an eye, your life can change. It's hard to sleep at night for me because I don't know what will happen tomorrow. I have dreams of bringing him home, and I have dreams of saying goodbye, and I don't know which dream I will be able to live out. 18 months ago, we got a call from a man who had been a cellmate of Owen Barber's in a prison when Owen first went to prison. And he said, I have some information for you. I can't keep it to myself any longer. At this point, Owen and Carl had been separated. They were in prisons that were 2 hours away. And my lawyers went down and met with Carl. And Carl said, Owen's lying. Justin had nothing to do with this murder. And they said, write it down. And Carl wrote a 15-page document on what Owen told him when they first met 5 years prior. He signed it. My lawyers turned around and left Carl, drove 2 hours to the next prison, and said to Owen, Owen, you're lying. Carl says you're lying. And Owen said, that's right, I am. He said, they made me tell this story. I had no choice. And they said, write it down. And so Owen, again, writes a document, 12, 15 pages worth, of what happened that night and how Justin had nothing to do with it. That Owen did this on his own, but he was caught by the prosecution and told that he had to tell this story or they were going to kill him. So Owen signed that document, and we filed it December of 05. November of 05 was the filing of our last appeal for Justin's life. A month later was when we filed an amendment to add those affidavits that say my son is innocent. The courts are fighting as to whether or not those affidavits are going to be allowed to be part of the record and taken into consideration to decide whether or not my son will live or die. It's been 18 months and we haven't heard anything. But it's getting a little scary because, like I said, Virginia's fast to execute. July 13th, they were supposed to execute Christopher Emmett. And when Justin got to the row, when they take the guys outside the 5 days a week, they're supposed to go out, they're put in dog runs, these cages, and they play cards through the fence to keep themselves entertained. And there was a group of men down there that Justin played cards with, and Emmett was the last one, Justin told me. All the other guys are gone. All of his other original buddies were gone. So it is getting scary because it is getting close. And I came down here 6 years ago, and I found these wonderful people who have helped me carry this cross that my family has been given. They've given me hope and they've given me strength. They've given me the opportunity to tell my story and help other people realize that the system is broken and that it doesn't work. And that if this could happen in my household, it could happen in yours too. I'm hoping that somehow our story can help somebody else. I think about the jurors that made this decision and how when the evidence comes out that my son was innocent, how are they going to feel? The prosecution didn't tell them the whole story. They had to make a decision on the information given to them. And their decision was wrong because of what they heard. They too have to live with that, what they've done. They take an innocent member of society and throw them in a courtroom and decide who gets to hear what and what's fair and what's not allowed and how we shut the case down so you don't get the whole truth and nothing but the truth. There's so many things that this case has opened my eyes to. How these young college kids make silly mistakes and have to pay with their lives for it. Danny's life is over. Owen's life has been changed forever. He faces 32 years in prison. And my son may face death. I'm hoping that I can open your hearts and open your minds and help you to understand, of course I'm preaching the choir here, how wrong it is to take the life of another person. That there's such a better answer. That killing my son will not bring Danny back. It will not make the patrollees feel better. It will only create more victims. Victims in my house. And somehow I have to get those children to grow up normal and understand what happened to their brother and how we have to fight for those who can't fight for themselves and hopefully help this change and hopefully show people that the death penalty needs to be stopped, that there's a better way. I was at the funeral for little Rima Samaha, one of the little girls who was killed at the Virginia Tech shooting. I coached Rima for 4 years. I've known her family for about 12 years, I guess. And I remember when that shooting occurred, how awful it must have been for the Cho family, for that young man who was mentally ill and created such a horrible mess for so many families. And yet they kept talking about the 32 victims of this crime. And nobody talked about the fact that there was a 33rd. There was a young man who was mentally ill, who killed a lot of people, and then killed himself. And at that funeral, it was a week later, not even a week, it was 6 days, but I hadn't heard anybody mention that poor family who was also suffering. But the father of little Rima said, somehow this didn't make the papers, he said, I want you to know that my last name, Samaha, means forgiveness. And we need to forgive the Cho family and remember that they too lost a son. And I thought, we all need to hear that because so many people were so angry and so upset and so devastated by this horrible crime. And it was the father of that beautiful young girl who was able to open his heart to forgiveness not 6 days later. And on that morning, that was the first time he'd seen his baby girl since she'd been shot. And yet, just a few hours later, at her funeral service, he's the one who mentioned forgiveness. He's the one who encouraged healing and encouraged people to forgive and go forward and remember Rima's life for what it was, not how she lost it. Thank you.